Alright, so I played a game recently called Incident at the Galley house. From the creators of Root Trees Are Dead, another game about playing with expectations and breaking the mold when it comes to game development. For that alone, that's already a praiseworthy game. However, after finishing it and even during, it's honestly better in every way. Well, except maybe the music. Rolling on down to the city is too damn good. What is it about? The Galley house, a forgotten mansion in the middle of nowhere, somehow entirely deserted, and nobody can recall anyone having ever lived there. And yet the bodies show up. Mysterious unsolved murders. Now, boarded up and left desolate, it is visited by Rhea Beacon, who is somehow presented by a mysterious machine already set up with instructions on how to use it. Armed with just her wits and this device, she will figure out the reason behind the deaths and solve the incident and the Galley house. So the idea here essentially is the same as Root Trees Are Dead, Demon Masquerade and the Case of Fraud. Only instead of internet searches and assembling evidence or inputting names, it's about reconstructing the scenes. So the player is given character numbers, a timeline and locations what they have to figure out for themselves. So the gameplay loop is selecting who was where and at what point. The scene plays out, and that is gonna give clues as to where they went, etc, etc. This whole thing can be extremely confusing, especially because it's so overwhelming with so many faceless characters at once in locations that are not even marked. But once getting into the swing of things, everything becomes fairly straightforward, and I really only needed a hint once. And that's because there was such a big formula change that I simply didn't understand what was required of me. So all the hints were entirely worthless, as they only spelled out what I already knew. I simply didn't understand what actually needed to happen. And I'm trying to be vague here, as it's very easy to spoil things. And this is not the kind of game that works with spoilers. This particular situation is the only real complaint, an objective one. So I will just say, unlike Root Trees, this flows extremely well. I wasn't just rubbing X on Y until it worked. The logic was very clear. And actually one cool thing I have found is that it doesn't seem like the names are strictly necessary to solve any of this. The player gets an ability to put faces on the sprites and write the names, but that's not the objective. And I kinda love that. 100% of all the clues in some of these games can be excruciating. And after finishing the game, and the correct names and sprites are shown. And turns out I had some of them very, very wrong, and it was absolutely fine. Also, there is the fact that this game has voice acting. It's not necessary either, but it helps so much. I definitely struggled remembering everyone in these other games, and when the entire mission is to identify people and follow them around, having someone to listen to helps immensely. And one complaint I would like to make, but it's kind of vague. So the idea here is that the player is not given the complete information ever. It's, oh yes, I was in that room with the dead body sometime earlier. Or, I told you before to look over those people back there. They don't spell it out, but it's not difficult to deduce what exactly do they mean. I kept overthinking everything, seeing patterns that were not there, and adding steps to what was extremely straightforward. Nobody lies either. Or at least not in a way that adds depth to the dialogue and the deduction. And that was a bit disappointing. In fact, the main mystery was disappointing. I kept thinking it's a lot more complicated than that, and I've had this whole overarching plot forming in my head, but instead, yeah, without spoilers it's a bit hard to explain. Let's just say I was a bit disappointed about the whole thing. Most of this was comparing those games more so than talk about this one in particular, I admit, but that's the thing. I do enjoy this kind of formula, and it works for me. And I don't believe anything in the Galley house is that amazing. So if you weren't excited about these kinds of games before, the execution will not really change it. No, not really. Does sitting there, flipping switches and reading the same dialogue over and over sound fun? Yes? Okay, then get the game. It's perfect. If not, and I perfectly understand that, I don't think there's a way to change your mind. I can imagine people saying how unbelievably dull it is, and that's completely fine, you do you. Some people adore Dead Space. I abhor how by the numbers that damn game was. Every single jump scare predicted down to the freaking second. Holy crap, how can anyone enjoy that piece of... Okay. Incident at the Galley House is a nice departure into a more gameplay-focused aspect of the investigation genre without straying too far from what this developer originally thrived with, and I believe it's worth checking out.